Hello, welcome to Photoshop Quicklabs. In today's video, we will be covering a couple of selection tools within Photoshop. For this video, we will be using Adobe Photoshop CC 2025. We will also be in Workspace Essentials Default. I would like to give a shout out to Cindy Hansen, the photographer who took this image, and I was able to get this off of Unsplash. The first tool that we will be covering is the object selection tool, which can be located here. You can also watch a short video if you have your tooltips activated. If we take a look at the menu at the top, we have a couple different options. We can go to the drop down here to reset our tool, which is what I would like to do right now. There we go. You also have the ability to make a new selection, add to selection, subtract, or intersect. I usually like working with add to selection since I can make a selection and then add to it right away. The Object Finder feature is turned on for us currently, which means that anytime I hover over something, it is going to give me an outline. How that outline looks is determined by this little gear settings here. So you see the object subtract, you have auto refresh, manual refresh if you want to manually refresh it. You also have a color feature, so if your image is primarily magenta, obviously magenta would not work for it, so you would switch to something else. I'm going to switch it over to chartreuse just to make, as you can see, if I'm not hovering or when I'm hovering, it can make things a little bit hard to see when the color is so similar. So let's go back over to magenta. The outline here is by 1.5 pixels around the object. I usually like doing 0 pixels because I like to see a solid view of what I am selecting. The opacity of that is set at 100, so that's a little tough to actually see the edges. I prefer to drop it down. You can drop it down, even if you drop it down to about 80%, you'll be able to see pretty well, but I usually like to drop it down to about 60%. Now I can see fairly well where my selection is. If I do not have my Object Finder on, if I prefer to turn it off, I can manually make selections in two different ways, and the mode would be right here. So first I have the rectangle marquee tool, so I would just click drag out and then Photoshop will calculate a selection. Or if I drop down, I can also use the lasso so that I can draw around my item and then Photoshop is going to make a selection. And you can see how well it did, even though I was really off in what I was doing. So I'm going to turn my Object Finder feature back on. And then you also have the ability to ask for hard edges or not, or to sample all layers. And while we're working with one layer at this moment, we won't turn that on. Now let's take a look at another tool for selecting in Photoshop. We're going to move over to this picture taken by photographer Brooke Lark that I also got off of Unsplash. Now this photograph, the objects within it are fairly solid. The colors are not, I would say, very complex. So for this, I can use something like the Quick Selection tool. The Quick Selection tool is a brush-based tool that allows me to select a variety of items in my photograph or just one. Here I have it set to new selection, but I can select it and add at the same time if I do the plus add. And I can make my brush bigger or smaller depending on the size of what I am selecting by hitting my bracket keys left or right. And all I have to do is kind of brush in the area. And so this makes it really quick to make selections of objects that you would like to select in your photograph. So if you only want to select the inside of the orange or the inside of the dragon fruit, for example, you can do that. Now I clicked a little too far out, so what I would want to do is first make my brush a little smaller, and then I can either hold down the Alt or Option key and brush away what I didn't want to grab, or I can simply change my tool to the Subtract from Selection. So those are two great tools to be able to make selections, whether you are using a photograph that is very complex or you are using a photograph that has big shapes that you just need to make some quick selections. In the next video, we will be taking a look at how to further refine your selections. See you then.